Hi there. We go back to the series on the Rhodesian Bush War and the Rhodesian Special Forces with this book, Only My Friends Call Me Crouks, which is written by Dennis Croukamp, who had a very, very interesting military career. And when I pulled it off my bookshelf, and went on Amazon to get the link for it for you, I was amazed to find out that it's almost £200 now, this book. So it's going into my safe with my other rarities and first editions. So in 1964, Dennis Croukamp joined the Rhodesian Army, went through basic training, and then joined the RLI, Rhodesian Light Infantry, 3 Commando. Now at the time, it was very much still a conventional unit, and it was highly disciplined, spit and polished. The RSM was Ron Reed Daly, and he set a very, very high standard. But gradually, things started to intensify. They did a lot of training, bush trips, urban coordinate search operations and this kind of thing. But then towards about 1968, the Bush War first glimmering started, and things hotted up. And he was actually awarded the Bronze Cross of Rhodesia during that time. He also started free fall at a sports parachute club, and got to represent Rhodesia on the Rhodesian team at the World Championships. In the early 70s, there were the first stirrings of what was to become the Selous Scouts, and Ron Reed Daly presented a talk to a group of people to see if there was any interest in them going into a specialised unit. And a few of the guys volunteered and went along, and this was the first selection course for the Selous Scouts. Now, I've already reviewed Ron Reed Daly's book, Pamwi Tete, which goes into this in tremendous detail. They hadn't really sorted out what they wanted as regards the selection course. The SAS had been running their selection course for some time, so that was well known, but they didn't really know how to select people for this particular role. So the first course was a little bit hit and miss, but it was nevertheless an arduous experience. The usual long walks with heavy weights, lots of PT, quite a bit of shooting and that kind of thing. But then what they did, and they did this for the first few courses until it became widely known, they briefed them on an op and put them on a boat and said they were going into Zambia. And this was just to test to see if they had the fortitude and if they would go to pieces or if they would grit their teeth. Then after that, the ones who had passed went into what was called the dark phase. And this was for badged operators only. And that side of the Selous Scouts was regarded as being top secret. There were other elements, for example, the territorial force, which did the column attacks mainly, and they weren't really in on the whole thing of the pseudo operations, which was in fact the raison d'etre for the Selous Scouts. It was to operate as pseudo gangs, get close to the actual terrorists and disrupt their activities. So, having passed selection and gone through the dark phase where he was inculcated in all the methods of the various terrorist groups, Bolzanla and Zipra, he started operating in two troop. Two troop was the result of the first selection course. One troop, which was already operational, had been made up from the former experimental teams, which had been going for a couple of years, mainly army with some police involvement, that was experimenting on the idea of pseudo-ops. People like Andre Rabi were involved, and he was unfortunately killed in a blue-on-blue. So after doing quite a few pseudo-ops and doing things like OPs to bring in the fire force, getting lots of kills in that, he became slightly disenchanted, and he wanted to do more reconnaissance work. He had actually been trained in reconnaissance by Ron Reed Daly back in the RLI, and he thought that was his forte, and he did actually was able to take his guys. By now he was running the troop and do some fairly long-range reconnaissance ops. But then the Scouts started a dedicated reconnaissance troop, bringing in people like Chris Schulenberg, and they were mainly former SAS guys, but Dennis Croukamp was asked to join, and he was then sent to military parachute school, static line, and then free fall. And the recce troop specialised in halo operations, and he was involved in the first of these into Mozambique. Now, one of the major parts of the book and the major parts of his story concerns an operation which was done in conjunction with Operation Marden, which was a column attack into Mozambique. And the idea was to send a recce group in to blow a railway line so that reinforcements couldn't come up. So there was Dennis, there was Wings Wilson, and there was Paul French. Now, I have reviewed Paul French's book in this series already. He's given his version of what happened. Basically, they were dropped in the wrong place, not an uncommon occurrence, and had to walk long distances, very short of water, and it was a three-man group, and a three-man group is not actually the ideal in reconnaissance. 2-man works and 4-man works, but 3 is an odd number. So Dennis, being the leader, he made the decision that he would take the water bottles and go and find water, which is some distance away. He did actually find it, but they became split. And Wings Wilson and Paul French started to try to make their way to where the column was for a possible extraction. It did start raining, and they had water. They had their mugs, but they didn't have any bottles because Dennis had taken the bottles. Meanwhile, Dennis has to do a long escape and evasion, one of the classic escape and evasions, and in the book it mentions Silito, a wartime SAS guy who walked in Libya for over 100 miles, I think. Also Chris Ryan during the famous Bravo 20 mission, and Dennis Croukamp actually ended up walking about 200k, and this is through heavy bush. It's very hot. There's the enemies all round. There's wild animals and very short of food and water. But he did it, and he got back right to the border, and got back to the Scouts. Now, in Paul French's book, he is actually very critical of the way Recce Troop operated. He said it was a bit slapdash compared with his previous experience in the Rhodesian SAS, for example, and in the British Special Forces, where planning was very, very methodical. And he, for example, the explosive charges they took, which was specially designed for train attacks, didn't work. And the reason it didn't work is that the weight of Mozambique railway lines was different from Rhodesian railway lines, and the pressure initiators didn't work. So the whole mission anyway was a failure anyway, even without what happened. Now in the book, there's large sections where he criticises Ron Reed Daly for various things, and he blames him for a lot of things. And in fact, he gets to the point where he becomes involved in the plot against Ron Reed Daly by certain elements in the intelligence community who wanted to bring him down. And they bugged his phone, and they were hoping to get information about ivory smuggling and poaching. It turned out it was a complete falsehood. It wasn't going on. But the phone bugging disclosed very, very sensitive information, and elements within the intelligence world in Rhodesia, and naming No Ken Flowers, a central intelligence organisation, were actually traitors. They were in the pay of British intelligence, and it is known that operational details were leaked, allowing targets to escape from Rhodesian cross-border operations. Ron Reed Daly was given a chance to respond, and his replies are printed, and so you can read both versions really. And in my opinion, Ron Reed Daly does come up with pretty good answers. And to be honest, Dennis Croukamp comes across as rather bitter. He's got certain bees in his bonnet. He slags off the Australians, apart from about 3 that he worked with, and he says the rest were pretty useless. And he hates Brits, POMs as he calls them, all of us. Okay, so make of that what you will. He doesn't really mention it, but after Rhodesia gained independence, he went down to South Africa, and he was a sergeant major with the Pathfinders down there, working with Pete McLeish. But one of the things he did after his military career, he was running a boating and diving school, and they organised a trip for school children, a camping trip, and the kids, both black and white, were all sitting round, and they were singing around a campfire, and they were singing Nkosi Sikelel' Africa, which is the new national anthem of South Africa. But it was the tune was used by the freedom fighters in the bush, and as the kids are singing, Dennis says to them, "Oh, I love that song." And the kids, "Oh, great." He says, "Yeah." He said, "When we used to hear it in the bush, we knew we were close to them and we were going to get lots of kills." So, needless to say, there was no further camping trips for Dennis. As I said, he had a very, very fascinating career. He did a lot, achieved a lot, there's no doubt about that. Operational Halo, for example. The book is highly detailed, right from the beginning, his military career, events and personalities, his memory, he must have kept a diary, is very, very full. The book's not worth £200, but I hear it's going to be reprinted. So if you're interested in it, you should be able to get it at a much more reasonable price.